I'm Kent Myers.
I'm Mick Cornett, and it's time for the verdict.
As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crowe and Dunleavy Law Firm presents The Verdict, an objective discussion of contemporary legal issues hosted by Kent Myers. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma. And welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. We meet here weekly to discuss current legal topics, as you know, and this week's show deals with the rights of gun owners. Let me introduce one of Oklahoma's top legal experts and my co-host, Kent Myers. Kent?
Mick, we have a great show today and a really topical issue that one wouldn't have guessed would be back in the headlines, and that's gun rights or gun control or the lack of gun control. Oklahomans are, by their nature, generally rather conservative about this issue, and they really want to be able to control their guns and have a right to deal with them as they want to. And that issue has come to the forefront again with our new Attorney General, John Ashcroft. He has issued a letter to the National Rifle Association affirming the individual's right to own and control and bear arms, to put it in Second Amendment language. And he has taken a position that some are now saying is contrary to the positions taken by the U.S. Supreme Court for the last 65 years. So there is, once again, a raging storm of controversy about the individual's right to own a gun, to bear arms, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
And we have Mike McCarville and John Coyle as our guests.
Yes, we have two very interesting guests and fellows who actually, it may surprise you, they actually have differing opinions about these things. And we're going to be asking our viewers, when we're finished, to get on our website and let us know what you think about Attorney General Ashcroft's position, whether it's right, whether it's wrong, and what is good gun control policy, if any.
Well, we'd love to hear from you, but first, let's have our show. It's an interesting topic, gun rights, and it should be a lively discussion right here on The Verdict.
I enrich our cultural landscape.
I help define our quality of life.
I am one of 4,000 artists in central Oklahoma who receive
support from Allied Arts, this community's united arts organization.
I am an Allied artist.
It's got to be around here somewhere.
Don't worry, we'll find it. Just calm down.
I swear it was right here on the desk.
All right, if I were a will, where would I be?
It's the only copy. Without it, we're out $3 million.
I know.
Hey, accidents happen. If a condom breaks
or you have unprotected sex,
you have 72 hours to reduce
your risk of getting pregnant.
It's called emergency contraception.
Got questions?
Call Planned Parenthood.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children has over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers in Oklahoma County who donate their time and services to represent children. For more information, call 405-23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
And And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and we're ready to discuss the issue of gun rights. And Kent, why don't you introduce our special guests?
We have two special guests, and I just am so glad that we have you, me, and this table between them. Because by the end of the show, we may be glad we've got these buffers. The first guest I want to introduce is to my right, Mike McCarville, a longtime fixture in Oklahoma. Mike is a newspaper reporter. He was press secretary to Governor Dewey Bartlett. He's been a columnist. He's an author of 12 books, and currently he is the host of a very popular radio show on KTOK, Open Mic Live. Mike, thanks so much for coming.
I appreciate you not referring to me as old, Kent.
Well, no,
you said I'd been around a while.
Yes, well, I'm very sensitive about that
Thank
myself.
you, I appreciate that.
We'll protect each other on that. On my left is John Coyle. John is a repeat guest on The Verdict, and as a matter of fact, John was one of our two guests on the very first Verdict show back in April. John is a well-known criminal defense lawyer as well as civil lawyer in Oklahoma County. He is the recipient of the Clarence Darrow Award as the outstanding criminal defense lawyer in Oklahoma, and he's selected by his peers as one of the best lawyers in America. And John, we're really glad you would come back to The Verdict.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Important topic.
It is an important topic. Gun rights, call it gun control, whatever you want to phrase it. The heart of the controversy is where are we going from here? The Attorney General has, as I indicated on the opening segment, started a firestorm with a letter that he wrote to the NRA, but as is my bent, being a law professor as well as a practitioner, I would like to just do a little bit of teaching here. And let's look, Mick, if we can, at the Second Amendment to the Constitution. The Second Amendment to the Constitution I have broken down into two parts on this chart. You can see the top part is in white and the bottom part is in yellow. And I want to read it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Let's just leave it up here for a minute. Really the argument, folks, that Attorney General Ashcroft has raised again is, do we construe the Second Amendment as what it is, one sentence, or do we say that it isn't punctuated correctly? It really is two thoughts, two sentences incorporated within one. Now, in other words, is the white part, the well-regulated militia, one right that each state has, and then the bottom part, the yellow, is this an individual separate right that the people have to keep and bear arms and cannot be infringed? Attorney General Ashcroft's position is these are two separate rights, and that the yellow right to keep and bear arms is separate from the white, if you will, lettered right of establishing and keeping a militia. That probably does more with that than we need to, but I hope it sets up the argument or the discussion. Excuse me. John, tell me what you think about the Attorney General's position on the construction of the Second Amendment.
Well, I'm really worried about the things that he said from the standpoint of him as the lawyer of the people. You know, he raised his hand and took the oath before Congress and said that he would uphold the laws concerning gun control and the laws concerning the Second Amendment. And the Supreme Court ruled 67 years ago that there is no constitutional right to bear arms. It's only in the context of the militia that it's supposed to be allowed. Now, and it really comes down to, Kent, whether or not you want your lawyer to lie to you, because that's what he did. He lied to all of us.
Well, by lying, you mean when he swore, and I have a quote from his testimony in front of Congress, that he would uphold the nation's gun laws, even ones with which he doesn't agree. Is that what you're saying is when he lied?
Well, that's one of them. He said he would uphold them. The problem is there's a case going on now in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans, where a judge in Texas ruled that there is a constitutional right to bear arms. And it's the only decision that way in 67 years. All of the other courts, including the Supreme Court of the United States on several occasions, have ruled there is no constitutional right. Now, the position of the government in that case in New Orleans is that there is no constitutional right. But the position of the Attorney General now, he's taken a different tack,
Yeah,
opposite to the lawyers that work for him.
Let's hold this up one more time.
Okay.
U.S. versus Miller in 1939 held that this was one sentence is to be construed together, that the right to bear arms does relate to the maintenance of a militia. And that is generally what Attorney General Ashcroft is now disagreeing. That's where he's disagreeing.
He's reading it. He's forgotten about the first part. He, like everyone else who is in the pro-gun lobby, and they want to make money for the gun manufacturers, don't care about kids, don't care about people being killed by firearms. They want to ignore the first part of it and just use the second part. And you got to read it together.
Clearly, gentlemen, the argument over the phraseology, the wording of the Second Amendment has engendered a lot of controversy. And I think, as I've said many times in the past, to me, considering the context of the language and the way it's phrased, you've almost got to go back to what the Founding Fathers were saying or said at the time.
Yeah, what they say.
We can find their additional thoughts in the Federalist Papers, and we can read the words of Patrick Henry, who said the great object is that every man be armed, everyone who is able may have a gun. So we get some insight into what the thinking was at the time. And I do agree with John Coyle that this language, I think, and I think we would all agree, to a lot of people is very confusing. And as you said, for lack of a semicolon, a lot of people are confused about this. To me, there is no ambiguity if you take it in the context of the time in which it was written and what the founders were saying in the documents, public and letters and writings that they issued contemporaneously with the writing of the amendment.
Well, what's good policy, Mike? What should be the control over guns in the United States, considering the Second Amendment?
There are, at present, 22,000 gun laws on the books of the United States, the states, local jurisdictions. There are those who argue, and I'm among them, that if we're going to really try to impact those who commit crimes with guns, let's enforce the laws we've got. And I know that John and others might say, well, now wait a minute, we got to get guns out of the hands of kids. We got to get the guns, we got to get them out of the hands of the criminals. But in the process, what we do is we penalize every law-abiding gun owner in the nation. And the arguments against gun control, in favor of gun control, I should say, sometimes, to me, trample on the rights of law-abiding citizens. And if we're ever going to correct the problems with criminals committing crimes with guns in this country, it is not going to be, from me, a law-abiding citizen, having to register my gun or have my gun confiscated by some entity of government on down the road.
Let's hold that thought. I sense we're just getting warmed up here. We'll get to a short break and return. We're talking about gun control and the rights of gun ownership. What's your verdict?
Yeah, campfire's a lot of fun. You get to make some friends. You get to do some cool stuff. Campfire's for boys too, not just girls. But hey, campfire's definitely for kids. So call the campfire office nearest you to join in on the fun. 'Cause let's face it, you're not getting any younger.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable, private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
Yesterday was plain awful.
You can say that. On Broadway is Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company.
Bringing our daughter here was one of the smartest things we've ever done.
I've learned a lot. I've gained a lot of confidence. They helped me develop talents I never knew I had.
And it's fun.
On Broadway, Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company. Now enrolling in Edmond. Call 330-CAST. That's 330-2278.
Every day, in state governments throughout the country, crucial decisions are being made that affect the lives of children and their families. But as this process takes place, children are often left voiceless. When these children raise their hands to be heard, is anyone listening? There are people listening. They are child advocates. Join us and raise your hand for kids.
We're discussing the rights of gun ownership. Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Kent, where are we here?
When we finished that segment, Mike was making a point, John, that the legislative history of the Second Amendment supports Ashcroft's position. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think it really makes any difference, Ken, because the law is clear. Everyone has the right to own a firearm as long as they qualify. So no one advocates taking away guns from people for legitimate reasons. What we want to do is to have strong background checks. We want to have longer waiting periods so that people who want to commit a homicide or who want to commit suicide, other things, have a cooling off period. So there's something that makes sense.
Well,
we don't want to take
John,
guns
excuse me,
away
I've
from
got to jump in here. John, you
Go
just
ahead.
articulated what I call the reasonable argument in favor of gun control. But your argument is far distant from that espoused by the folks at Gun Control Incorporated and everything else. Their goal, make no mistake about it, is to eliminate the private ownership of firearms in the United States of America.
That's
it's not hogwash.
Absolute hogwash. No one advocates that who's sensible. It's just like all we want to do is keep guns away from kids.
Well, keeping guns away from kids. Let's keep knives and pencils and automobiles away from kids. Same difference.
No, it's not the same difference because
How is
with knives and pencils and automobiles, 77% of kids who are killed between the age of 13 and 19 are killed with a firearm by somebody else, by some
somebody
juvenile,
else. That being the key.
by
And
some
that would
juvenile.
include instances of inner-city crime, I presume. Gang activity, in other words.
No, not gang activity. Do you know
where does that
no
statistic
one
come from,
uses
then?
a firearm? No one uses a firearm for protective purposes. Do you know that you are 22 times more likely, if there's a gun in your home, it's 22 times more likely to be used to kill someone in your family or someone else than it is to ever be used for protection. It's hogwash. It's the biggest misinformation in the history of our country.
Gun control to me, John, is when I've got the gun in my hand at midnight when you're trying to come through my front door.
And that's when it's never used. And you have the right to have a gun. You have the right to have a gun. But people who have committed crimes in the past, people who are violent, known to be violent people.
We got no disagreement on those two.
Others,
Yeah.
Well,
they shouldn't have firearms.
Okay, we got 22,000 laws on the books right now. Let's enforce them. Let's get the criminals that use the guns and let's lock them up and throw the key away.
Do you know that since we had the Brady Act in 1993, in the first 6 years of the Brady Act, there were 600,000 people turned down for the purchase of firearms and over 100,000 dangerous criminals apprehended just through that program. Gun control, restrictions on the purchase of firearms works. It works to get guns out of the hands of criminals. It works to eliminate guns going to people who will use them to hurt you or someone you love.
John, is it your contention that somebody who wants to use a gun to commit a crime is going to go into a gun store and try to buy it?
Oftentimes they do. But the less guns there are, the better off we all are in terms of gun
There you're
crimes.
going down that slippery
Steadily.
slope right there. You
That's
just
not
started
a
down it,
slippery
John.
slope.
Yes, it is.
Well,
You
Mike,
just started down
That's
it.
hogwash.
Mike,
it's
let
not
me-
a slippery slope.
Let me interrupt just a second here and ask you about the recent government suspension of the Buyback program.
Yes, the Bush administration.
Yeah, tell our viewers just in a couple of sentences what the Buyback program was, and then what is your view about its suspension?
Well, essentially, as it was promulgated and put into effect, Kent, by the Clinton administration, the use of federal dollars, if you will, to buy back weapons in the major urban centers of the country, primarily on either coast.
And what do you think about its suspension?
I think it's way past due. I think it should have never been started, much less being suspended now. I think it's a good idea.
The suspending is a good idea.
Yes, the suspending is a
Did
good
it not
idea.
do any good?
Well, For example, Miami, Florida. Great deal was made about how successful this program was in Miami, Florida. What they found out was that about 60% of the weapons that were turned in and people were given money for were inoperative to begin with. They were ancient shotguns, they were ancient hunting rifles, they were World War II trophies that were no longer even function. So you got to question the efficacy of a program like that.
Yeah.
Particularly spending your money and my money and John's money and Mick's money for that kind of a program.
But is the criticism of the buyback program one that it's just too many dollars thrown down the drain, or is it that it's just not?
Is it the business of the federal government to be in the purchasing of weapons from private citizens? If you answer yes, then you're going to come down in favor. If, like me, you say no, then you come down against it.
You mentioned background checks, John. That's something that wasn't in place a number of years ago, at least to the extent it is now, and there is a good deal of concern that the laws about background checks are going to be put in reverse in this new administration. What do you think has been the good or bad of background checks?
Oh, there's no question about it. It has been the single most effective deterrent against violent crime in this whole century.
Well, what about the argument that the criminals are going to get their guns anyway?
Well, the harder it is for someone to get a gun, the more paperwork it takes, the better off we are as law-abiding citizens. The more difficult it is for a criminal to get a gun. Gun violence is down in this country. It has gone down steadily every year since 1993 when we had registration, when you had to sign your name to buy a firearm. And that's the way it ought to be. You ought to have to be accountable if you want to own a firearm. Owning a firearm, holding a firearm in your hand, loading a firearm is a tremendous responsibility. It's not a constitutional right. It's a responsibility.
Let me
So
hold
we
it
all
right
should
there.
treat it.
John, we're going to, actually, you'll get the final word today. We got a couple of minutes left.
What do you mean he's going to get the final word? You can't let him do that.
I'm going to give each of you 1 minute to kind of sum up your thoughts here on this subject of the rights of gun ownership. Mike, why don't you go first?
Well, first of all, I think the idea that gun control is the precise phrase. It is controlling the ownership of firearms by law-abiding citizens. That's what the gun control movement in this country has been all about, and John can say it's absurd and ridiculous all he wants to. The bottom line is the people who favor gun control in this country, in the main, are those who want to eliminate the private ownership of firearms in this country. I say that is a dangerous slope, and we don't want to go down it.
All right, John?
I agree that that's a dangerous slope to ever take away the private ownership of firearms, but that is not the goal of any legitimate organization at all. All we want to do is to keep firearms out of the hands of kids and out of the hands of dangerous people who would hurt someone that you or I love. That's what we need, and we need to have longer waiting periods. We need to close the gun show loophole. We need to close the loophole, because loopholes cause bullet holes in people. And it's shown that gun control works. It's helped bring down violent crime.
Let's call an end to it right there. Great debate, both of you. I appreciate you both coming on. Kent and I will have a final word when we return on The Verdict.
Hello, my name is Ted Smith. I'm president of the board of directors of the Oklahoma Disability Law Center. ODLC provides free legal services in civil matters to people with physical and mental disabilities.
I'm Mike Sykes, Vice President of ODLC. For more information, call 1-800-880-7755.
The Oklahoma Disability Law Center provides high-quality legal services to people with physical and mental disabilities.
In Oklahoma, there are more than 1,600 children waiting to be adopted. They're of all ages, and for many, home has been a source of pain and conflict. They've dreamed of finding a better life and a loving family. Consider adoption. For more information, call 1-877-OK-SWIFT or visit the website www.okdhs.org. Adopt. It may be the toughest job you'll ever love.
Boy Scouts of America, where above all else, character counts.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
Welcome back to The Verdict. That was a fiery conversation.
It was, and we expected it to be, and we weren't disappointed. It's interesting, those two guys really know what they're talking about. Mike McCarville has his pulse on what's going on in Oklahoma and nationally. It's his job to do that, but I think it's his passion as well. And John Coyle's every day in the courtroom defending people accused of crimes, and many of those people have used handguns or other weapons in the process. So they both come to this debate from a little different perspective. And they both bring a lot of credibility to their arguments. They've done their homework, and I hope our viewers appreciate that. Speaking of appreciating things, I want to pull up a graphic now because the graphics that we use are furnished by Legal Graphics Incorporated. Sam Anderson and Janice Fowler just do a wonderful job for us. And Mick, I'm very grateful to them. They do a grand job, and so that's the end of that commercial. But we do appreciate Sam and Janice's work here on The Verdict. One final thing I'd like to ask our viewers to do, get on our website, www.theverdict.tv, and let us know what you think. Do we have too much gun control? Do we have too little gun control? What's your verdict?
And I think the key on that website is it's not .com or .edu, it's .tv, theverdict.tv. And as Ken said, we'd love to hear from you, and perhaps we'll be reading some of those responses on a future show.
Well, I'd look forward to doing that.
Thanks again to our guests, Mike McCarville and John Coyle. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time on The Verdict.
This program was brought to you by Crowe and Dunlevy, a professional corporation. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma.